Ethan Carter stood in the grand hall of the Xaverian Empire's flagship, his hands clasped behind his back as he faced the towering alien queen. The hall was massive, decorated with glowing blue crystals and intricate golden engravings. Rows of Xaverian warriors stood on both sides, their violet eyes fixed on him with quiet curiosity. The atmosphere was tense, but Ethan had been trained for moments like this. As a diplomat from Earth, his job was simple: maintain peace, negotiate trade, and ensure that the powerful Xaverians remained allies rather than enemies. But standing before Queen Zyra, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. The queen was impressive, nearly 8 feet tall, with shimmering silver skin and a crown of curved dark horns. Her long, flowing robe made her look regal, yet there was an undeniable air of warrior strength about her. Unlike human rulers, Xaverian queens were both leaders and fighters. They earned their thrones through skill, not bloodline. Ethan had studied the Xaverian language before coming here. He had practiced every word, every phrase. He knew that a single mistake could offend their strict traditions. And yet, when the ceremonial moment arrived, he felt his confidence slip. A Xaverian priestess stepped forward, holding a crystal-tipped staff. "Do you accept the terms of unity between Earth and the Xaverian Empire?" she asked in a deep, melodic voice. Ethan nodded and replied in their language, his voice steady. "I accept this bond with honor." The room fell completely silent. Queen Zyra's eyes widened slightly, and then, to Ethan's horror, she smiled. The warriors around the hall lowered their heads, and the priestess raised her staff higher in approval. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. Something was wrong. Zyra stepped forward, her piercing gaze locked onto him. "You have spoken the sacred vow," she said. "Before all present, you have accepted the bond." Ethan frowned. "Yes, the bond of peace between our people." The queen chuckled, a deep and almost amused sound. "No, human, you have accepted the bond of union." Ethan's stomach dropped. He had mispronounced the word for peace in their language. Instead of agreeing to a diplomatic alliance, he had agreed to marriage. He looked around, hoping someone would correct her, hoping this was some kind of misunderstanding. But the way the warriors clapped their fists against their chests in approval told him this was very, very real. The priestess turned toward the gathered warriors and spoke in a firm voice. "It is done. The queen has chosen her mate, and he has accepted. The ceremony is complete." Ethan felt like the air had been knocked out of him. "Wait. What? No, this isn't." Zyra placed a firm yet surprisingly gentle hand on his shoulder. "Do not worry, Ethan Carter," she said smoothly. "You will be well cared for. This is an honor beyond your understanding." Honor. Ethan felt his legs go weak. He tried to protest, but a group of royal guards stepped forward, clearly ready to escort him. Somewhere he wasn't sure he wanted to go. He turned to his fellow human diplomats, expecting them to step in, but they looked just as shocked as he was. One of them, a nervous-looking aide, whispered into his earpiece, "Sir, we're not sure what to do. If we object, it could be seen as insulting their traditions." Ethan clenched his jaw. He had spent years training for high-stakes negotiations, but no one had ever prepared him for accidentally marrying an alien queen. The queen turned and began walking toward the exit, expecting him to follow. The guards motioned for him to move. Ethan took a deep breath. He needed a plan. He couldn't just accept this mistake, but rejecting it outright could cause a diplomatic disaster. As he stepped forward, he muttered under his breath, "I really should have studied harder." The doors closed behind them. His fate, it seemed, had already been sealed. Ethan Carter followed Queen Zyra through the towering golden doors, his mind racing. The grand hall of the Xaverian flagship faded behind him as he entered a massive, dimly lit chamber. The walls shimmered with glowing blue patterns, and the air carried a faint scent of something floral yet metallic. His heart pounded. He still couldn't believe what had just happened. He had spent years training as a diplomat, mastering alien languages, studying cultures. And yet, one small mistake in pronunciation had led to him accidentally marrying an alien queen. He needed to fix this. Fast. The guards flanking him stepped aside as Queen Scifi gestured for him to continue walking. She moved with grace and confidence, her long robes flowing behind her like liquid silver. Ethan took a deep breath. He had to handle this carefully. One wrong move, one offensive word, and he might not just ruin diplomatic relations. He might insult the most powerful woman in the Xaverian Empire. As they reached the center of the chamber, Scifi turned to face him. "You look troubled, Ethan Carter," she observed, her violet eyes watching him closely. Ethan cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, I think there has been a mistake." "A mistake?" She raised an eyebrow. "Yes." He tried to keep his voice calm and respectful. "I meant to accept a diplomatic alliance, not marriage." Sarah tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. "You are not the first to make such an error," she admitted. "Our language is complex for humans." Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she would understand. Maybe she would undo the bond end. But, she continued, the vow was spoken before the High Priestess and the warriors of the royal court. In Xaverian law, words hold power. What is spoken cannot be undone. Ethan's stomach dropped. "So, there's no way to cancel this." Scifi folded her arms. "Not without bringing great dishonor to both you and me." Ethan rubbed his temple. "Okay, so what does this marriage actually mean?" On Earth, marriage is a lifelong bond, but in different cultures, it varies. Scifi nodded approvingly. A wise question. She stepped closer, and Ethan resisted the urge to step back. She was intimidating, but not in an aggressive way. More like a warrior sizing up a new opponent. In our culture, the queen's mate holds an important role. You will have a place at my side, advising me in matters of diplomacy, strategy, and governance. Ethan blinked. "So I won't be locked away in some tower." Zira actually laughed, a deep, rich sound. "You are no prisoner, Ethan Carter. You are a consort of the throne. You will have respect, freedom, and authority." That wasn't as bad as he expected, but it was still a problem. "I appreciate the honor, truly," he said carefully, "but Earth never planned for this. My government sent me as a diplomat, not a royal consort." Zara studied him for a moment. Then she turned and gestured toward a circular platform at the center of the room. It lit up with a soft blue glow. "Come," she said. Ethan hesitated but stepped onto the platform. Instantly, a holographic display flickered to life, revealing a vast star map filled with glowing constellations and marked territories. "This is the current state of our galaxy," Tyra explained. "Our empire is powerful, but we have enemies. The Xaverians have long stood alone, believing no species could match us in strength or intelligence." She turned to him, her eyes sharp. "But humans are different." Ethan frowned. "Different how?" Zyra's lips curled into a knowing smirk. "Resourceful. Unpredictable. Your people have no genetic enhancements, no advanced technology, and yet you survive. You adapt. You find ways to win battles you should not win." Ethan crossed his arms. "And that's why you wanted an alliance." "Yes." Zyra nodded. "But our traditions require more than just words. True alliances are forged through blood, battle, or bonding." Ethan sighed. "So this marriage was your way of sealing the alliance permanently?" She nodded. "A diplomatic contract can be broken. A royal bond is eternal." Ethan felt his mind spinning. This wasn't just about some accidental wedding. This was about the future of Earth's relationship with an interstellar empire. If he publicly rejected the bond, it could offend the Xaverians, possibly turning them into enemies. But if he accepted it, what then? Could he really be a consort to an alien queen? Could he live in a palace on another world, away from Earth, away from everything he had ever known? He took a deep breath. He needed time to think, time to figure this out. Zyra watched him closely, as if she could sense his inner conflict. "You do not need to decide everything now," she said at last. "But understand this, Ethan Carter. You are no longer just a diplomat of Earth. You are part of something greater." The glow of the star map reflected in her violet eyes. "For better or worse," she added, "you are mine now." Ethan swallowed hard. This was only the beginning. Ethan Carter stood in the grand chamber of the Xaverian flagship, staring at the vast star map before him. The glow of distant planets flickered across his face, but his mind was spinning with thoughts of what had just happened. He had come to this alien empire as a diplomat. Now, thanks to a simple mistake in translation, he was suddenly the husband of Queen Kyra, ruler of the Xaverian Empire. And there was no way out. The weight of the situation pressed down on him like gravity from a collapsing star. Zyra, standing beside him, studied him with an expression of calm confidence. She didn't seem worried about his reaction. In fact, she seemed almost amused. "You still look troubled, Ethan Carter," she said, her voice smooth but firm. Ethan took a deep breath. I never expected to be in this situation. I was supposed to negotiate an alliance, not become royalty." Zyra smirked. "And yet, here you are." He sighed. "You said I won't be locked away, but what exactly do you expect from me?" Zyra gestured toward the star map, shifting the display to show various factions and battle zones. Ethan could see glowing red lines where conflicts were taking place and blue zones where the Xaverians held power. "Our empire is strong, but enemies gather at our borders," she explained. "The Xaverian High Council believes strength alone will keep us safe, but I see things differently." She turned to face him, her violet eyes intense. "I believe in strategy, in alliances, in intelligence." Ethan frowned. "And you think I can help with that?" Zyra nodded. "Humans have a way of thinking that is different from Xaverians. Your people are unpredictable, adaptable. You have survived and thrived in situations where stronger species would have failed. That is why I pushed for an alliance with Earth." Ethan studied the map. "So you don't just need a husband, you need a partner." Zyra smiled slightly. "Exactly." Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, this was insane. He was on an alien ship, bonded to a queen, with no way back home. On the other hand, she wasn't treating him as a prisoner. She was treating him as an equal. "I still don't know if I'm the right person for this," he admitted. Zyra raised an eyebrow. "You are already in this role, Ethan Carter. The question is not whether you are right for it. It is whether you will rise to meet the challenge." That hit him hard. She was right. This wasn't some negotiation he could walk away from. He was already here. The only question was what he would do next. Ethan exhaled slowly. "All right. If I'm really your consort now, I need to know more about Xaverian culture, their politics, their traditions. If I'm going to help you, I need to understand your people." Zyra's expression softened to just a little. "A wise request. Very well, I will assign you a guide." "No." Ethan shook his head. "I want to learn from you." Zyra blinked, clearly surprised. Ethan gave a small smile. "If I'm your consort, I should understand things directly from the source. I need to see how you rule, how you make decisions. That's the only way I can be of real help." For the first time since meeting her, Zyra looked truly impressed. "Very well," she said, nodding. "You will accompany me to the Royal Council tomorrow. There you will see the power struggles that shape our empire." Ethan felt a chill of anticipation. He had spent years negotiating with alien governments, but this was different. He wasn't just an outsider looking in. He was inside the very heart of power now. But something told him that not everyone would accept him so easily. The council's opposition. The next day, Ethan walked beside Xyra through the grand halls of the Xaverian capital, deep inside the massive flagship. Guards lined the walls, their armor reflecting the glowing energy lights above. The Royal Council chamber was massive, with towering pillars and a circular table where high-ranking officials sat. As Tyra entered, everyone stood and saluted, pressing their fists to their chests. But when Ethan stepped in, the mood changed instantly. Whispers, furtive glances, tension filled the air like an approaching storm. One of the council members, an older Xaverian with a stern expression, narrowed his eyes. "Your Majesty, you bring the human into our sacred halls." Zyra's voice was calm but firm. "This is Ethan Carter, my consort. He has the right to be here." A murmur spread through the room. Another council member, a sharp-featured woman with piercing golden eyes, leaned forward. "Your Majesty, a human is an outsider. He does not understand our ways." Ethan could feel the hostility in the air. Zyra didn't waver. "That is why he is here, to learn. His insight may prove valuable to our empire." The older counselor shook his head. "With respect, Your Majesty, a human consort is unprecedented. Many will see this as a sign of weakness." Zyra's expression hardened. "Then they are fools." The entire room fell silent. Ethan glanced at Zyra, impressed by her authority. She wasn't just strong. She knew exactly how to command respect. Still, it was clear that not everyone in the room was on her side. And if he wanted to survive in this new world, he would have to prove himself, not just to Zyra, but to the entire Xaverian Empire. He was no longer just a diplomat. Now he had to be a leader. Ethan stood tall in the center of the Xaverian Royal Council, but he could feel the weight of every gaze upon him. The chamber was vast, its walls shimmering with alien inscriptions, but all of that faded in the face of the intense hostility radiating from the gathered officials. The older counselor, Vorik, was the first to break the silence. His deep-set golden eyes burned with skepticism. "With respect, Your Majesty, the Empire has never accepted an outsider into its ruling chambers. A human consort is unthinkable." A murmur spread across the table. Some council members nodded in agreement, while others remained neutral. Ethan knew this was a test. He was not just standing in a meeting. He was standing in a battlefield of words. He took a deep breath and spoke. "I understand your concerns. I am not Xaverian. I am not one of you. But I am here now. And I have no intention of standing in the shadows while your enemies plot against you." His voice was steady, and for a brief moment, the murmurs stopped. A female counselor, dressed in flowing silver robes, narrowed her violet eyes at him. "And what does a human know of Xaverian politics? Of war? Of power?" Ethan met her gaze. "I know that your enemies don't care about tradition. They don't care about what is unthinkable. They only care about finding your weakness. And if you let your pride blind you, that weakness will be your downfall." A ripple of surprise moved through the council. Some of them seemed to reconsider their stance. Others looked more annoyed. Zyra smiled slightly. "Well said, Ethan Carter." But Vorik was not convinced. He stepped forward, arms crossed. "Words are cheap, human. Prove to us that you are not just an outsider who stumbled into power." Ethan frowned. "How do I do that?" The counselor's lips curled into a smirk. "A trial. The trial of insight." Zyra turned sharply toward Vorik. "A trial? This is unnecessary." Vorik's expression remained firm. "If he is to stand beside you, let him prove his worth." The council members whispered among themselves, clearly intrigued. Ethan sighed internally. He should have known this wouldn't be easy. Tyra studied him for a moment before speaking. "Very well. What trial do you propose?" Vorik's smirk deepened. "The trial of insight, a test of strategy and wisdom. Let the human face a challenge that any true ruler must overcome." Ethan straightened. "What kind of challenge?" Vorik gestured to a hovering console at the center of the chamber. The lights dimmed, and a holographic battlefield projected in front of them. "This is a real conflict unfolding at our borders," Vorik explained. "Our forces are locked in a deadlock against the Ravkan raiders. If you are as intelligent as the Queen claims, then you will find a way to turn the tide." Ethan studied the hologram. Red icons represented enemy forces, while blue icons marked Zavarian ships. The situation was dire. The Zavarian fleet was outnumbered and surrounded. He had no military background, but he had played enough strategic simulations back on Earth to recognize patterns. And one thing stood out immediately. "They're baiting you," Ethan said suddenly. Vorik's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Ethan pointed to a section of the map where enemy forces were spreading thin. "The Ravkan raiders are leaving this flank open on purpose. They want your forces to commit here." He moved his hand over the central line of defense, "so they can collapse on you from both sides. If you attack now, you'll be trapped." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. One of them tapped into the console, running Ethan's prediction through the war analysis system. Within moments, the simulation confirmed his theory. If the Zavarian fleet had attacked, they would have suffered a catastrophic loss. Silence filled the room. Vorik's smirk was gone. Ethan exhaled. "But there's a way to turn this against them." He pressed a few buttons on the console, adjusting the simulation. "Instead of attacking, let your forces pretend to take the bait. Have them feign a retreat. When the enemy collapses in, you strike from the flanks instead of the center. Turn their trap into your trap." The new simulation ran. And this time, the Zavarian fleet won. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Even those who had doubted him now looked at him with something different in their eyes. Vorik, for the first time, seemed genuinely impressed. Zyra smiled. "It seems my consort has proven his worth." New respect, new enemies. As the council session ended, some of the members came to acknowledge Ethan's skill. They might not have fully accepted him yet, but they could not deny his intelligence. However, as Ethan left the chamber, he could feel a pair of unfriendly eyes watching him. A tall Zavarian in black armor, someone who had not spoken during the meeting, leaned against the wall, arms crossed. His cold, reptilian eyes locked onto Ethan. Zara noticed him too and whispered, "That is General Kaler. He commands our military forces, and he is one of my strongest critics." Ethan had a feeling that this was only the beginning of the challenges ahead. He might have gained the council's respect, but he had also gained new enemies. And in the game of power, those enemies would not hesitate to strike. Ethan barely had time to process the council's reaction before General Kaler stepped forward. His dark armor gleamed under the chamber's lights, and his cold, reptilian eyes were locked onto Ethan with undisguised hostility. "The council may be impressed by your words," Kaler said, his deep voice echoing in the hall. "But words alone do not make a ruler." Ethan sighed internally. Another test. He had just proven his intelligence and strategy, but it seemed that wasn't enough for everyone. Zira narrowed her eyes at Kaler. "What are you suggesting, General?" Kaler's lips curled into a smirk. "A warrior queen does not need a weak consort. If this human is to stand beside you, let him prove he is not a burden." Ethan crossed his arms. "You want me to fight, don't you?" Kaler nodded. "Not just fight. Survive." A few council members murmured in interest. This was an opportunity to test the human in a way that couldn't be debated. Zira frowned. "You expect him to duel you? That's ridiculous. He is not trained in Zavarian combat." Kaler chuckled. "Then it will be a quick fight." Ethan exhaled. He knew he couldn't back down. If he refused, he would lose the respect he had just earned. If he fought, well, he wasn't exactly a warrior, but he wasn't helpless either. "I accept," Ethan said firmly. Kaler's eyes glowed with amusement. "Then let's see what you're made of, human." The Arena of Trials. The duel was set for the next morning in the Arena of Trials, a grand coliseum where warriors were tested for their strength and skill. Ethan stood at the center of the arena, his heart pounding as thousands of Xaverians watched from above. Some were excited, others skeptical. Zyra stood at the edge of the arena, arms crossed. "You don't have to do this, Ethan." He gave her a lopsided grin. "I do. If I run now, I'll always be seen as weak." She sighed. "At least take this." She handed him a short energy blade. It was smaller than the weapons Xaverian warriors used, but it was light and quick, better suited for someone without raw strength. Ethan took it and turned just in time to see General Kaler step onto the battlefield. Unlike Ethan, Kaler carried a massive war blade, nearly as tall as himself. The difference in size and power was obvious. The announcer's voice boomed through the Colosseum. "This is a trial of strength. The challenger must endure for 5 minutes against General Kaler. Victory is survival." Ethan tightened his grip on the blade. 5 minutes. That's all. He could do this. He had to. The duel begins. The gong sounded, and Kaler lunged forward instantly. Ethan barely dodged as the warblade sliced through the air, the force of the swing kicking up dust. His instincts screamed at him to move, to stay out of Kaler's reach. Kaler smirked. "Running already?" Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he kept circling, waiting for an opening. He knew he couldn't match Kaler's raw strength, but strength wasn't the only thing that mattered in a fight. Kaler attacked again, this time faster. Ethan dodged, barely managing to deflect the strike with his energy blade. The impact sent him stumbling back, but he stayed on his feet. The crowd roared in excitement. Kaler's smirk faded slightly. "You're quicker than I expected." Ethan exhaled. "And you talk more than I expected." Kaler's eyes darkened, and he charged again. This time, Ethan didn't just dodge, he countered. Instead of running, he stepped inward, letting Kaler's attack just miss, and slashed at his opponent's side. The blade connected. It wasn't a deep cut, but it was a hit. The crowd gasped. Even Zyra's eyes widened. Kaler touched his armor where Ethan had cut him. Slowly, he smiled. Interesting. But now he was serious. Surviving the last minute. The next attacks came harder and faster. Ethan barely had time to breathe, let alone counter. Kaler's strikes came in rapid succession, forcing Ethan to focus only on dodging and blocking. His arms ached, his lungs burned, and he knew he wouldn't last much longer. Then he heard something. A loud chime. The trial is over. The challenger has endured for 5 minutes. The arena erupted into cheers and shouts. Some Xaverians were impressed, others shocked. Kaler lowered his blade, exhaling through his nose. He stepped forward and, to Ethan's surprise, extended his hand. "You have earned my respect," Kaler said, his voice no longer mocking. "You are no warrior, but you are not weak either." Ethan took his hand, shaking it firmly. Zyra smiled from the edge of the arena. Ethan had survived. And now he had one less enemy. The Colosseum was still roaring with excitement as Ethan walked out of the arena, his arms aching from the duel. He had survived. He wasn't sure if he had won Kaler's full trust, but he had proven himself strong enough to stand beside Zyra. She met him at the exit, her arms crossed, but a small smile on her lips. "You're full of surprises, human." Ethan chuckled, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You sound shocked. Didn't think I'd last, huh?" Zyra shook her head. "It's not that. Most warriors can't even land a hit on General Kaler." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Then I hope that means I get a little respect now." Before Zyra could answer, a deep voice interrupted. "You have earned it." Ethan turned to see General Kaler himself, standing tall with a calm expression. His golden eyes studied Ethan carefully before he gave a small nod. "You may not be Xaverian, but you have proven your worth," Kaler said. "I will not challenge your place by Zyra's side again." Ethan felt a wave of relief. He had fought for survival, but now he had won something even more important: acceptance. The council's verdict. Back in the royal chamber, The High Council gathered once more. The atmosphere had changed. Before, the council had been skeptical of Ethan, but now they looked at him with curiosity and consideration. Gazera sat on her throne, her expression serious. Ethan has passed the trials. He has stood in battle, endured hardships, and shown strength. Now we must decide his place. One of the elder council members, an old Xaverian with deep blue scales, tapped his claws against the stone table. Tradition states that a queen's consort must be a warrior of our people. Another council member, a woman with violet skin, leaned forward. But he has proven himself in ways that go beyond strength. He is intelligent, resourceful, and determined. Kaler stepped forward. I once doubted him. Now, I do not. He has my support. The elder Xaverian sighed. Then we must ask the most important question. What does the queen say? Silence filled the chamber as all eyes turned to Exira. She looked at Ethan for a long moment. His heart pounded. Was she about to reject him? After everything, was she going to say no? Then she stood. I have made my decision, she said. The room was tense. I choose Ethan. A murmur spread through the council. Some looked pleased, others hesitant, but no one spoke against her. Zaira turned to Ethan, her expression unreadable. Ethan, do you accept this role? To stand beside me, not as a ruler, but as my partner? Ethan exhaled. He had never expected to end up in a position like this. But now, looking at Xira, at everything they had been through, he knew his answer. Yes, he said, without hesitation. The ceremony begins. The decision was final. The royal bonding ceremony was set for the next evening. Xaverians moved quickly, preparing the palace for the event. Ethan found himself in a grand chamber, being dressed in ceremonial robes. Dark, lined with silver patterns that represented strength and honor. He looked at himself in the mirror, feeling a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. This is insane, he muttered. A few days ago, I was just an outsider. Now, I'm part of an alien queen's life. The door opened, and Sarah stepped in, wearing her own ceremonial attire. A flowing deep red outfit with golden accents. She looked regal, powerful, and beautiful. Ethan swallowed. So, what happens now? Xira smirked. You stand by my side. You prove to my people that you are ready for this. He sighed. No pressure. She chuckled. You've survived worse, human. Ethan grinned. That's true. A new beginning. As the ceremony began, the great halls of the palace were filled with Xaverian warriors, council members, and citizens who had come to witness history. Ethan stood beside Xira at the center of the great hall. A royal elder stepped forward, holding a golden ceremonial staff. Before the people of Xaveria, we acknowledge this union, the elder declared. A queen and her chosen consort. May they bring strength to our people. Ethan glanced at Kyra, and for the first time, he saw something different in her eyes. Not just confidence, but trust. He had started this journey as an outsider, but now he was part of something greater, and his adventure was far from over. The grand hall of the palace was alive with energy. Xaverian warriors stood tall, dressed in their finest ceremonial armor, while nobles and council members filled the room, watching the final moments of the royal bonding ceremony. Ethan stood beside Xira, his heart pounding. The elder holding the ceremonial staff raised it high, marking the conclusion of the ritual. It is done, the elder announced. Before the eyes of the Xaverian people, Queen Xira has chosen her consort. May their union bring strength and honor to our world. The crowd erupted into a thunderous cheer. Ethan exhaled, his hands clenched at his sides. He had made it through trials, battles, and politics, and now he stood before an entire alien civilization, not as an outsider, but as one of them. Xira turned to him, her golden eyes searching his. You did well, human. Ethan smirked. Not bad for someone who didn't even know what he was agreeing to, right? She chuckled. You adapt quickly. That is a strength. But before they could exchange another word, a loud horn echoed through the hall. The celebration came to a sudden halt. A Xaverian warrior rushed into the chamber, his expression grim. "My queen, we have received a distress signal from the outer colonies. An unknown fleet is approaching our borders." Murmurs spread among the council. Hajira's face hardened. "How many ships?" "Over a dozen," the warrior said. "Heavily armed. They are not responding to communications." Ethan's instincts kicked in. That doesn't sound like a diplomatic visit. Zyra nodded. "We must act immediately." She turned to the council. "Prepare the fleet. I will lead the defense." One of the council members stepped forward, concerned. "But my queen, the ceremony." Zyra raised a hand, silencing him. "My duty comes first. If an enemy threatens my people, I will stand at the front." Ethan saw the determination in her eyes. He had come to respect her as a leader, as a warrior. He took a deep breath. "Then I'm coming with you." The council gasped. Even Zyra seemed surprised. "This is not your fight, human." Ethan met her gaze. "Maybe not, but I won't stand by while my queen, my people, go to war." Zyra studied him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "Then prepare yourself. You will fight beside me." The battle begins. The Xaverian war fleet moved swiftly, launching from the planet's surface and heading toward the outer colonies. Ethan stood on the bridge of Zyra's command ship, watching as dozens of sleek, dark Xaverian vessels streaked across the stars. Zyra stood at the command console, issuing orders. "All fighters, hold formation. Defensive shields up. Do not fire unless provoked." Ethan's hands tightened into fists. He had never been in a real space battle before, but he could see the tension in Zyra's warriors. They were preparing for the worst. The enemy fleet loomed ahead. Massive, black ships with glowing red markings. They were unfamiliar, not Xaverian, not human. A transmission came through. The screen flickered, and a strange insectoid alien with sharp mandibles appeared. Its voice was deep and guttural. "This territory is now under our control," it declared. "Surrender or be annihilated." Zyra's eyes narrowed. "We do not surrender." The alien warrior sneered. "Then you will be the first to fall." The screen cut off. Red warning lights flashed through the ship as the enemy vessels began to charge weapons. Ethan clenched his jaw. Here we go. The fight for Xaveria. The battle erupted in a storm of energy blasts and explosions. Xaverian fighters darted through space, engaging the enemy ships in intense dogfights. Zyra's warship took a direct hit, shaking violently. "Shields at 60%, a warrior reported. Zyra remained calm and focused. "Target their main destroyer. Fire at will." Ethan could do nothing but watch as the battle unfolded. He was no pilot, no soldier, but he wasn't useless either. He turned to a tactical officer. "Do you have access to their communication signals?" The officer hesitated. "A partial link." "Why?" Ethan grinned. "Because if we can't outgun them, we outsmart them." Working quickly, he manipulated the enemy's frequency, sending false signals, confusing their coordination. Within moments, the alien fleet began turning on each other, firing at their own ships. Zyra's eyes widened. "What did you do?" Ethan smirked. "Just a little human trick. Messed with their targeting systems." The Xaverian fleet seized the opportunity, striking hard. One by one, the enemy ships fell, forced to retreat. The battle was over. A new era. Back on the planet, the victory was celebrated. Ethan had proven himself once again, not just in combat, but in strategy. Zyra stood before her people, addressing them. "Today, we have seen what unity can achieve. A Xaverian queen and a human standing together, fighting together." She turned to Ethan. "He came to us as an outsider. Now, he is one of us." The crowd cheered, chanting his name. Ethan shook his head, grinning. Never thought I'd be a hero in an alien kingdom. Zyra smirked. And yet, here you are. As the celebrations continued, Ethan looked up at the stars. He had come to this world by accident, but he had found something greater than himself. A home, a purpose, and maybe, just maybe, a future among the stars.